When I was born, my father, who was 22 years older than my mother, so he was about 49 or 50, was making quite a bit of money working or owning the rights to the Duesenberg automobile showroom in Washington, D.C. And so they did very, very well for about the first 5 years, and then the Great Depression, they went bankrupt. So I sort of remind myself that I grew up in a reasonably well-to-do family and then suddenly had everything yanked out from under me. And in fact, we bought an old trailer and headed for northern Canada, I think to get away from the bill collectors. So that's always been a part of my life, is remembering that hard work and money is very important to get along. But when we returned, we didn't have anything and lived in a little tiny apartment. So I grew up, I often say, quite well-to-do and then very, very poor. And from that point on, from the time I was about 6, we were going from one small rental house to another, and finally ended up out in Wheaton, Maryland, which in those days was a long way out of Washington, D.C., and grew up on a little farm that we rented, $30 a month for a 20-acre farm. And my brother and I raised a great deal of the food that we ate. Every morning before school, I got up early, fed the chickens, milked the cow, and then tried to get a little bit of the smell of the cow off of me before I went off on the school bus. So we've always been very frugal, and in fact, today we're still very frugal. But my father was had a great gift of gab, could tell a wonderful story. My mother said your father can sing the birds right out of the trees. So telling stories and being involved with understanding around me I guess, had been built in some way by my father. When it came time to go to high school, my older brother, who won every award you could win in school, suggested to my mother that I go to school in the District of Columbia, since she worked at the Red Cross at that time, and this was the very early part of World War II. I was able to go to school in the District of Columbia because my mother worked there in Washington. And I did not do well at all, other than I met my bride, I met Dot, so in the 11th grade, I just was miserable, and I was not getting good grades, and decided when I was 17, I'm going to join the Marine Corps. My older brother had finished school, and he went into the Marine Corps, and that was good enough for me. And off I went into the Marine Corps. And I've never been quite sure, but I think Mother knew somebody, because when I finished basic training, boot camp, I was assigned to an aircraft carrier working out of, or just being built in Norfolk, Virginia. That was the biggest break I'm sure I've ever had, other than marrying Dot, because I didn't have to go off to the South Pacific and go around jumping from one island to another being shot at. I was a 40-millimeter gunner aboard the aircraft carrier, and we did eventually get to Okinawa, and we ended up getting 2 battle stars, and I was also the captain's orderly. And I think I did well in the Marine Corps because my father had been military, because my brother was in the Marine Corps and told me what to expect, and I knew how to say yes, sir, and no, sir. I was in great shape physically. I had been running cross country in junior high school and high school. So I wasn't concerned about the military, and in fact, the Marines were pretty tough on everybody. So I ended up being the orderly for the captain, and I stood on the bridge. In fact, I was on the bridge of the USS Shangri-La when the captain received a message in mid-August of 1945, and he read the message to the officers who were standing there, and I was standing there in the background, that President Roosevelt had announced that the Japanese emperor had surrendered. When World War II was over, I was discharged from the Marine Corps and had to go back and finish high school. And of course, my girlfriend from high school, who's now my wife of some 62 years, wanted me to go to college. So the GI Bill put me into college, but I thought I needed something more in order to get into a good school. So I joined the Potomac Bloke Club and took up kayak racing. And I was very, very fortunate to have an excellent teammate, John Eisman. He had been in the Navy during the war, and he too was waiting to get into college. So we paddled and won a couple of national championships together for 2 years, and then tried out for the Olympic team. And darned if we didn't make the Olympic team, and I got to be a member of the Olympics. This is in the uniform for the Olympics in London, which were 1948. We then went on to university. We kept training down at the Potomac Boat Club at the Potomac River. And darned if we didn't make it again and went to the Helsinki Olympics in 1951. I have to add that we didn't win the Olympics, but I can honestly say I have been beaten by some of the world's best canoeists. Following getting my degree, I got my first job with IBM selling electric typewriters at the Washington, D.C. office. Cut. Okay. Do you want to hear anything about that? Westinghouse had a contract with OFRS, Office Recherche des Sous-Marins, to develop for Westinghouse a research submersible called the Deep Star. So I was really the only non-engineer working at Westinghouse selling these products, and because I had had a lot of experience selling to the Navy in Washington, D.C., it all came together. My military background, working in military electronics, and now with working with Westinghouse and with Cousteau. In fact, I said to Cousteau on one meeting when we first had met each other, and I said, I think, Captain Cousteau, I think what I'm going to do is go to night school and learn to speak French. And he said, oh, Tom, no, 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 please. I assumed that he had an idea what my French would sound like, and bonjour, mon capitaine. So he just said, just speak English. I suddenly had an extraordinary project on my hands. So the three of us, companies, Westinghouse and the Navy and Cousteau, we set up office in San Diego and operated there off of a ship that we leased for 30 days. And so every day, and I almost stayed there for every day, we would go out. I got to know all of the ocean scientists, and each of them got a chance to dive in the Scripps Canyon, which at that time had never been seen before. Divers had been down maybe 150 or 175 feet. They had lowered oceanographic instruments, but there was this 1,000-foot deep canyon right off of the Scripps Pier. And of course, Scripps, University of California, Scripps, was teaching oceanography. Everybody was dying to see it. So every day we were taking 2 and 3 scientists out, and they actually were diving down into the canyon. And one day I got a chance to dive down in the canyon with Albert Falco, and we got down to about 900 feet. And it just was an amazing experience, certainly my first time underwater that deep. I had started diving because I wanted to impress Cousteau that I could do it. Because I was sort of the oldest guy around at that time. I was about 42, I think. And they were all a bunch of young guys. One of the most fascinating aspects of my dive in the deep research vehicle, Deep Star, and having the window all to myself for 8 hours, was to see the incredible variety of life as we slowly descended. There never was a moment, there was not some sort of living organism passing by the window. And I felt as though I was immersed in a great soup of all kinds of things. And when you consider that I was only looking at a minuscule fraction of the ocean, which takes up about 70% of the Earth's surface, it made me think about how incredible the oceans are and how rich the oceans were. And this was long before people began to worry about the serious environmental damage being done in the ocean. So I feel very fortunate that I had the chance to truly see the Earth's oceans inside and out. One of the biggest mistakes that I ever made for the family. Canada, Vancouver is a gorgeous place. We had a wonderful home. The kids all went to school there. And our relationship with Canadians was not good. I don't know whether it's because we were Americans or because I came wandering in as this American who now is going to be president of all these Canadians. Whatever it was, it really had a difficult time, at which point the board of directors of this little company, I was there about 20 months, decided that I would no longer be president, but that because of my contract, I could be the marketing manager. And I told them, no, I didn't sign on to be marketing manager. I am for president, and if in fact you do demote me, then I'm going to have to bring a lawsuit against you. So they did demote me. I brought a lawsuit against them. I won the lawsuit, and the company went bankrupt, and I never had a nickel. And at that point, we got on our little sailboat and took off 2 weeks and went sailing around in Howe Sound, and it was beautiful. And with the kids and the family, really had a wonderful chance to be together. When I got home, we had a phone call from André Laban, who was running the Cousteau operation in France, and certainly was very important in the operation in the United States, where Cousteau had a production company in Hollywood or Los Angeles, headed up by his younger son, Philippe. So Philippe was looking for someone to run his company, which was called Thalassa, which is a Greek word basically meaning the sea or the ocean. And so I went down to LA and met Philippe Cousteau for the first time, and we just hit it off. He wanted an American. He wanted somebody who knew about contracts. He wanted somebody who knew about accounting. He wanted somebody who knew about running the business, and certainly somebody who could help them come up with, to manage a film company. So Dot was agreeable. We sold everything in Canada, and we moved down to Los Angeles, and I went in as the vice president of Thalassa, reporting directly to Philippe Cousteau, but still being point man for Jacques Cousteau. Anything that went on in the United States that required Jacques Cousteau's attendance, other than something where there was going to be a lot of money involved, they had to contact me. It was a dream job. It was exciting. It was dealing with television. I had no responsibility in terms of having to make money. The Cousteaus were doing that themselves. I was there to provide contact with the press and with the people in France, which was always amusing because the office would get phone calls, someone speaking French, and ask, is Philippe there? And no, Philippe is not here. Is Capitaine there? No, the captain is not here. Let me speak to Tom. So now they're speaking French and I'm speaking English, and I would sit there then and talk to them, find out what it was they wanted, tell them I understood, and to this day I have no idea how they understood or how I understood. I didn't know a thing about television. I didn't know a thing about film production or television production, but I sure knew how to run a little business, and I knew the ocean activity. So I moved with the family. Dot was agreeable, as she always was, for me to do the things that I thought would be interesting, and if we could make a slightly better salary. So we moved the family to Los Angeles, and I took over the small company. And I was there alone quite a bit of the time, managing the small group, and groups would come over to edit there in the office from France. And it was just a very, very pleasant and wonderful experience. And we went from, I guess, about 12 programs at that point. ABC was doing so well with them that they entered into a contract to make 24 more programs. So that was in the very early 1970s. What Cousteau was doing, no one had ever done before. People suddenly found the ocean and what was down inside the ocean. There was always that element of danger, of the possibility of being attacked by some great fish. And it just worked well. And of course, Jacques Cousteau is an incredible writer, has an immense imagination, and spoke English so beautifully and wrote English so beautifully, and so did Philippe, that it just kept growing and getting more and more popular. Paul McCready, a brilliant, brilliant man, Pasadena PhD and Caltech. We had a nice talk, although he's rather slow. He doesn't have a dynamite personality. So when we were through, or pretty well through, and we still had dessert, I said, well, what else have you been doing, Paul? And he said, well, I've made a human-powered airplane and won a prize. And I thought, this guy is a real screwball. Human beings don't have enough strength to fly a human-powered airplane. And I never said that to him, fortunately, because he reached down in his briefcase, took out Sports Illustrated, and there was a picture of the Gossamer Condor flying a figure-8 course and winning a prize of 50,000 pounds sterling, about $180,000 at that time. And immediately I became impressed that this was a very interesting guy. And he said, I've developed a new human-powered airplane because there's a new prize. Fly across the English Channel, 26 miles, and win 100,000 pounds sterling. So DuPont agreed to support the television program. It would be a single 1-hour special about the flight. And they then asked me who would produce it. And I said, well, I've had 7 years with Cousteau. I'll produce it. Fortunately, no one asked me if I had ever produced a film or knew anything about producing films. And I didn't want to spoil the whole program, so I just kept it quiet and came home and contacted a cameraman that had worked with me at Cousteau, and he was available and he was willing to go and do the whole thing. And we settled on a partnership, which we called Horton. And we filmed everything that went on. We went down to the hangar, we filmed the manufacture of the plane, the upgrading, we filmed crashes, we filmed out riding the bicycle to get his training for the pilot. I was just offshore in 3 boats that I had acquired and set up with camera crews going, and we filmed him from the very minute. We had 1 cameraman on shore and 3 on boats, and off he went and started across the English Channel. The flight was quite long, much longer than anyone thought. He then took off that morning, flew across the English Channel, kept the airplane somehow in the air, and when he landed on the beach in France, it was exactly 49 minutes. I had the film crew on the beach before Brian arrived. We had 3 cameras going. We were almost underneath the airplane as it came slowly in on the shore, doing about 5 knots. It was impossible to believe that that airplane would fly so slowly. The press were everywhere. The thing was overwhelming. There were 3 guys from DuPont, from Delaware, who were there. And as things calmed down, one of them turned to me and said, "Did you get it all on film?" It was all shot on 16 millimeter. I said, that's why I had 3 cameras going, plus a guy over here on the beach and a guy back there. I said, we got it. Somebody's got it. He said, we have a winner. So from the Paris Air Show, I went and got on a bus and headed back to France, or to Paris, I should say. I figured I'd spend the night and go back. And lo and behold, who gets on the bus right behind me was Philippe Cousteau, who of course had been my boss for the 7 years that I'd worked for the Cousteau company, and then later the Cousteau Society. So I said to Philippe, what are you doing here? And he said he had just been filming in Virginia, and what am I doing there? I had just been filming the Gossamer Albatross. So I said I was going to go into Paris and spend the night and in a hotel. He said, no. He said, we've got 2 apartments. So then we went to where he was staying, and I got 1 apartment, and he and Jan and daughter Alexandra were in the other one. I then, of course, asked them, could we have lunch the following day? And we did, and we had a wonderful lunch. And I then went back to England and got all the equipment packed up and shipped it back customs, back to the U.S. About a week or 10 days later, I got notice that the shipment had arrived, and I went down to LAX, Los Angeles Airport, and went through the customs detail. And while I was there, a truck driver came in and saw a friend of his, I guess, and said, hey, did you hear that that guy Cousteau has been killed? And I thought he meant Captain Cousteau. And I rushed to the telephone and called the Cousteau Society and talked to Norman Solomon, who was a friend of mine there. And Norman said, no, it was Philippe. It was a terrible, terrible, terrible disaster. And I lost one of my best friends. Once we were back to the U.S. from the flight across the English Channel, it was time to start working on the film. So we decided to hire a very fine editor in LA, and we took a hotel room, a small suite, and set up everything to start editing there and to go through and log all of the footage. So Joe Thompson, who had been my co-producer, he started out as a cameraman, but he wanted to move up a bit in terms of his experience. So we took the title co-producers. So we were having breakfast one morning, and he looked up and said to me, "My gosh," he said, "there's Hal Holbrook." So I looked down, and there was a single table, small table in the hotel, and there, sure enough, was Hal Holbrook having his breakfast and reading a newspaper. So I hired Hal Holbrook, and we had him do the narration. It was an extraordinary opportunity. Holbrook was amazing in his narration. He was willing to do it. It was fun to work with him, and I needed a second take on everything. And I would say, "Do you mind give us a second take?" And he said, "What was wrong with the first take?" I said, "Oh, nothing. It was okay." And I'd speak to the sound man, "No, that was fine." And he said, "Why do you need a second take?" And I said, "Just to be careful." He said, "You don't need to be that careful." And the next thing I know, I got a call from the head of CBS Sports saying, "Would you be interested in having us run the film about the albatross?" I said, "Well, DuPont has a lot of money invested. It would be pretty expensive." He said, "I think I can match whatever price they want," which he did. And so our first sale was to be a special on CBS Sports, which was an incredible starting point for a distribution. Unbeknownst to me, DuPont submitted it for the Emmy Award. And about 8 months later, I got a call saying, "Did you know that you were nominated for an Emmy Award?" Well, that was an incredible feeling and notice to be told. And sure enough, it did win the Emmy for that year, which I thought was pretty good for a brand new documentary filmmaker who had never made a film before. But I think our success, and we were successful, for somebody who had never made a dadgum film, we were very successful because my background was marketing. I wasn't going to France to try and sell a film to somebody that had one. I was there to buy a film. Then I would turn around 6 months later and sell it right back to France, but to a different network, and change the name of the film. And many times we got things people said, "I saw that film when it was produced by so-and-so, and I liked your version better." You know, things like that were so much fun. But my God, the people I've met, the places I have been. I think the travel, the opportunities to see the world, my God, Tom.
It was educational.
Yeah.
Very educational. It continued to be a wonderment to everyone. Yes.
And bless you, my son.